Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchtime series with me, Kevin Britz, proudly sponsored by leadershipbydesign.co, leading the change with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me in today's leadership and coaching segment, we have a Toronto-based coach joining us all the way from Toronto, Canada. He's a lifestyle fitness coach who is going to teach us more about, well, he's going to introduce it, so I'll let him do it. Santo Chiappetta, is it Chiappetta?
Yes, Chiappetta. Perfect.
Here we go. Santo, thank you for joining us, and thanks for making the time to chat to us. So, I mean, before we kick it off, don't you want to just tell us who you are, tell us a bit about your story, and give us some insights about what we're going to be chatting about?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show today. I appreciate it very much. I'm excited to chat with you. So a bit about my background, my relationship with fitness and health and just what got me into what I'm doing now actually started when I was a teenager. I had actually gotten into competitive amateur boxing. So I started as a competitive amateur boxer. I was fortunate enough to have a coach who put me through, quite intense training as boxing is. And it was helpful in regards to just establishing a certain mindset and a perception on, an identity around how we can always be improving and have a growth mindset, no matter what we're kind of interacting with or dealing with. So I felt like that was super helpful in my development as an adult now. And from there, I had gone on to school to try and get my kinesiology and fitness and health promotion diploma, which I did end up getting. So I went to University of Guelph Humber. I was super fortunate that my coach pushed me to go do that because he had told me, boxing's a great sport, but it's not always plan A. So you have to plan for the plan in case your plan doesn't necessarily go as according to plan. So got into coaching. I've been working with people, as young as 6, teaching them how to box, and as old as 65, making sure that they continue to move well and establish a healthy lifestyle so they can implement things like longevity practices so this way they can live a long, fulfilled life and have a good quality of life with that as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, and to one of the conversations when we first sort of chatted, we sort of prefaced what we would be going to chat about today. And you sent through some information, and one of the themes that you sort of help people deal with is the not enoughness. And I think it's such a big conversation, and it's such a relevant conversation because so many people, we have that they put on a facade, they put on a make believe, pretend kind of approach to their lives, but there's that nagging inside kind of not enough feeling. So don't you want to sort of give us some insights on, why that conversation, and, does that stem from something that you've overcome as a survivor of that, maybe?
I wouldn't necessarily use the verbiage survivor because I feel like that in itself kind of puts you in the headspace of like victim mentality of sorts. So I think we all deal with it at some point in time. I'm a strong believer in that. And I think it comes from a place of being ambitious and wanting to achieve more and have a life that's not necessarily as ordinary as others, right? We want to have a life that stands out. We get exposure to many different lives now with social media and being able to see how other people are living, and maybe it feels as if we're not doing enough, right? And this kind of stems from what I've recognized from a lack of just recognizing what it is we've already done, right? Like, you wake up in the morning, you don't necessarily, account for, okay, there's going to be running water when I flip the tap on, right? So it's almost taking things for granted versus, being grateful for them. And I think at times when we look at what it is that we do have, it can often just be put into a place of like, we're entitled to that. That's part of my life. That's just the way it should be, right? And we don't necessarily see that those things are, not everybody has them. So when we kind of take those things for granted, it makes us look at the things that we don't have instead versus being grateful for what we do have. And I think that this comes down to a lack of kind of tracking what we're doing and just making decisions based on emotion rather than logic or data, right? So if I, for example, just relevant to what I do, if I am trying to help somebody lose fat, build muscle, right? They're looking at the number on the scale. It's often a super common metric, right? Well, what do I weigh? But the scale doesn't always tell the whole truth, right? So the scale reflects your weight, but that doesn't necessarily give you all the information regarding fat loss, right? So a secondary metric that you would want to use would be something like taking measurements, right? So my weight may stay the same when I embark on this fitness journey, but if my measurements are going down and my weight is staying the same, this would be indicative of me having a degree of fat loss as well and improving my muscle mass, because there's a recomposition of how our body is forming and kind of taking form to the process that it is you're putting it through.
Yeah. So just to recap on what I'm hearing is, so the things that we actually take for granted very often leads to the not enough kind of conversation that essentially stems and leads to certain types of behavior and certain types of results. And it's purely based on the fact that you're not keeping track of the data of your life and really supporting the data of your life with, you actually are doing stuff, you are achieving, and flipping that around and kind of having more intentional awareness around what it is you're achieving.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think when we give ourselves credit for what we're doing instead of trying to look at what we're not doing, then that gives us, validation that, okay, I'm actually doing things with my life that are constructive and moving me towards my overall goal that I'm trying to work towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you also share with us in the information that, one of the things that we don't realize, having a mindset, a creator mindset versus a victim mentality. And you speak to, some points around why this happens is not having the tough conversations and the lack of conflict resolution and the inability to plan ahead. Do you want to elaborate more on those three factors on why those really help create a creator mindset versus a victim mentality?
Yeah, I think this comes down to more so the perspective that life is maybe happening to you instead of you creating the life you want. And I mean, given the circumstances that someone's going through, sure, that can maybe seem the case. And I think when we zoom out and take a look at the circumstance you're dealing with from a higher point of view, maybe like a 10,000 foot view, as some would say, then it allows us to look at the whole picture, right? Not just a small speck of the timeline. So when we do that, it gives us insight into, okay, is there an opportunity here for me to use this either in a way that I can, maybe use to my advantage? Is it a way that I can create from this challenging experience and not put myself in a position of, like I mentioned, just being a victim, right? So I think when we kind of try to rescue ourselves out of a situation instead of trying to coach ourselves out of a situation, it makes it much more challenging to see where there's opportunity or where we're able to see the light or the lesson that comes with that versus seeing it as a loss. We can see it, okay, what can this teach me? How can I adapt to this?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good reframe, right? 10,000 steps away from it and kind of stepping out of the emotional connection and the messiness that sometimes we go through. But, that disassociation can really give us a bit of perspective and look into the problem instead of just being part of the problem.
Absolutely.
That people sometimes, they don't see that they have that ability to kind of go, okay, you're just part of the situation right now. If you can just detach from it for a second and become the observer of the problem, it also changes the problem, right?
Definitely. And I think that there's a gentleman by the name of David Foster Wallace. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he speaks about, so what is water, right? So where he talks about the fish swimming through the lake or the stream and asking other fish, boys, how's the water today? And the other fish are looking at him like, well, what's water, right? So sometimes, there's another version or iteration that's saying of like, you can't read the label when you're in the jar. So when I'm in the jar of the situation that I'm in, it's really hard for me to see a solution to what it is I'm going through. However, if I remove myself from that position for a moment and say, okay, I'm going to step back from this for a second, even writing it out as to what the circumstance looks like, maybe that'll give you insight into a different approach to take or how to navigate in a different way that's a little bit more positive and maybe even constructive to what it is you're dealing with.
So, I mean, one of the things you bring to this point as well that you sort of shared with me is the challenges that leadership really, sits with, and it really ties into that creator mindset. Don't you want to unpack that for us a little around leadership and being the leader or being a coach or a mentor and why that's important?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to, I think good leadership comes down to always having a plan or being able to be adaptive and adapt to a situation at hand. So this way you have contingencies for when things go sideways. Because if, as long as we plan that our plan's not going to go to according to plan, then our plan's going to be good to go. So I think that, if we implement the idea of if this, then that, then it allows us to have contingencies for when things might go sideways. So if I plan on doing X, or if X happens, then Y can happen. And just having these, kind of backstops for any sort of challenges or issues that come up. So this way we always have a plan of sorts to help, move and take the next step forward for what it is we're looking to do to get us towards a common goal. How we do that is making sure that we understand what the vision is, what the mission is, what the purpose is of what it is we're doing. So this way, everyone's on the same page in the same direction, and there's no misunderstandings around that, or there's areas of opportunity to provide clarification as to how to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, one of the things that we've mentioned earlier, the victim mentality, kind of when we step into that, it also, you share with us, it absolves us from responsibility, and we often find that, and sometimes, being a fitness expert, you would understand, that sometimes we're victim to, I just don't have enough time, or I'm victim to, I just, I've got so much work that I have to do, and we become victim of our own lives to a large degree. Don't you want to just chat to us about that victim mentality and how, taking responsibility actually is really important to be able to step out of that?
Yeah, so I think, that victim mentality comes from just looking at things from a few different mindsets where, we either persecute ourselves for not making the right decision or being in a certain circumstance, and that puts us in a headspace where we start to associate with things like shame and blame and guilt for maybe not making the right choice. And like, you made the best choice you could based on whatever information you had. So now that you're there, make the next logical choice that you can, right? You only have as much context as you have given the situation at hand. So if you're making the best decision that you could given the information you have, and that's the best decision you can make. I remember growing up as a kid, I would come home from from getting back an exam or a test, and my parents would ask me like, "Oh, what mark did you get?" And I would tell them, "Oh, I got a 75 or a 60." And they would look at me and say, "Did you try your best?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, then that's the best you could have done. If you didn't try your best, that's another conversation you have to have with yourself. But as long as you tried your best, then that's all you could have done, and that's what you got." Right. And I think we spoke about this on our initial call as well, about this idea or fear of failure too. And, if we look at that 70% that I got in the test, okay, so there's still 30% I don't know, or I have area of opportunity to improve, right? So we can reframe things in a way where it's like, okay, well, I really enjoyed this thing that I'm doing. There's still 30% more that I can learn that maybe I could enjoy even more, feel more passionate about, even be more inspired with, versus looking at it as, okay, I didn't do well enough. I'm inadequate. I don't know well. I don't know anything. It gives us a reframe to let us see things in a way where, okay, there's more opportunity to be had here that maybe I can appreciate even more than I thought I already understood.
What's interesting as you were speaking now is the way that you sort of spoke about that victim mentality. Is what's interesting that when we find ourselves doing that, it's also because I'd rather, because of the fear and because of the shame and because that internalized voice is louder than most voices, we keep ourselves in the victim mentality because it's easier to not have to take responsibility. Because if I did show up, what if I did fail? So the fear of failure becomes the overriding kind of theme, and so you keep that victim mentality alive, really, purely based on the fact that you're afraid to show up, you're afraid of the fear of failure, you're afraid to put yourself out there, you're afraid to be judged, right? And essentially, it always reminds me a lesson I learned very well a long time ago was, the moment you show up in comparison to someone, you're already debilitating yourself, So
Absolutely.
when you're putting yourself out there and going, okay, cool, am I doing better than I did yesterday? Then I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'm totally doing better than I did yesterday. And when you're putting yourself in measurement of yourself, it's a really good way of building confidence and really stepping out of victim mentality, because then you've got something to measure by. But if you're just simply doing it according to, well, I'm not, like, I can't be Santo, and I'm never going to be his fitness level, you're already putting yourself at the back foot, because there's a comparison happening. And I think very often people don't realize that victim mentality comes from having a comparative mindset, and you're comparing yourself to people the whole time, and it's not an internalized thing, and it's an external kind of comparison.
I 100% agree. And I think there's a degree of evaluation apprehension people have that stops them from taking any approach at all. And the only way to make sure that you actually fail is to not even try, because even in the approach, you're going to learn something that's going to be valuable to you to be able to maybe then attempt it again, right? So you're not going from a place where you failed. You're going from a place where, okay, I didn't achieve the goal, but I now have experience as to what doesn't work. So we start to find these proverbial edges as to the path that's going to get us to where the goal is that we want to be at. And in that, when we point fingers, or maybe we're saying this is this person's fault or this is my fault, when we point fingers instead of looking at our own efforts as to maybe what we did or didn't do to achieve that goal, then we give power to those things that we're blaming, instead of saying, okay, well, I could have done this better. Here's an area of opportunity to improve, right? And relative to what you just said about comparing ourselves as well, there's this theme of absolute strength versus relative strength in fitness, right? So absolute strength is, okay, Kevin, me and you are going to have a deadlift competition. We're going to see who can deadlift the heaviest. All right, Kevin can put 600 pounds on the bar. I can only put on 400 pounds on the bar. Kevin's stronger than me, but Kevin weighs, significantly more than I do. So relative strength, absolute strength, absolutely, you have more weight on the bar, cool. But relative strength to what the ratio is from body weight to the amount of weight that's on the bar, maybe I'm stronger in that sense. So this reframes things from a perspective of self-competition versus externally comparing ourselves to others. And when we're constantly competing with ourselves, that's when we start to improve ourselves, because we're our only competition.
Absolutely. I love that you use that as an example, because it really clarifies that whole the version of, like, really understanding that the only person that you're ever really in competition with is yourself. Until you conquer the mindset, until you conquer the fitness, and until you conquer the level of strength for your body weight, mindset weight, that whole understanding of what's relative and what's real, you got to really understand the context to that. And I think the way that you explained is brilliant, because one of the things you do mention here is, the turmoil around the cognitive dissonance that you have, and that we struggle with, right? Because, everybody wants to get to that ideal weight. Everybody wants to succeed. Everyone wants to live up to their New Year's resolutions, right? But for me, it's always a question of going, well, what system have I put in place? Has anything changed? Has anything, am I setting myself up for success? And I mean, from a fitness perspective, this is something that you're an expert at. Diet, and I often find that people look at fitness and fitness instructors or coaches or health coaches as it's purely about diet, and it's purely about how you should manage food intake and exercise. But to the knowledge that you've just explained now, there's so much mindset and understanding that goes with the fitness, and hand in hand with the fitness, right?
Absolutely. And all the fitness decisions you have to make, all of the nutritional decisions you have to make, those come from an environment that's set by your mindset. So if my mindset is one in which I don't think I am, I'm going to achieve this goal, then the decisions you're going to make are going to be ones that are going to self-sabotage you, to make sure that that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where I am not going to achieve that goal. So when I put myself in a headspace of, I can do this, I will do this, then it's a position where, okay, that means that I'm going to start making the choices associated with that goal. So one of my favorite phrases I ask my clients when, we're doing any sort of goal setting or establishing what it is they want to achieve, I ask them, okay, are the choices you're making conducive to the goals you set? And if they're not, then this is where that cognitive dissonance comes into play, right? Where it's, okay, this is what I think I'm capable of achieving. Here's what I'm actually able to achieve. How do we bridge that gap between those two things? Because that gap in between those two things are where a lot of feelings of disillusionment live, a lot of feelings of not feeling adequate, or fear, or that I'm not going to achieve that goal live. So the smaller we make that gap, where it's, okay, Coach Santo, I want to get 10,000 steps a day, and I want to drink 5 liters of water a day. Okay, cool. Let's track it. How many steps are you currently taking? No idea. Okay, so we have no data as to where you're currently starting at. So maybe 10,000. Why don't we start with tracking our steps? That would maybe be the first. Okay, cool. Let's do that. Cool. Turns out we take 3,000 steps a day. Let's aim for 4. Right, and just gradually making progressive steps to improving what it is that we're trying to do. Right, and getting towards that goal in a logical sense. When we look at it from a fear of failure perspective, I always mention to people, imagine the first time you fell over when you tried to walk. You thought that walking wasn't for you. Of course you're going to fall. There's going to be days where you want 5,000 steps and you get 4,500. Does that mean the whole day is a waste? No, you were 500 away from crushing it. Right. So
I mean, one of the things you also shared with us is the importance of why tracking data, and I love that you're using sort of a mechanism to actually even to compare it to leadership, because essentially one of the sentiments I always have, and it boils down to very simplistic approach, is leaders create leaders, right? And with that, a leader is always he's always prepared, and like you were saying earlier, there's always agile and adaptability at hand, and the approach that you're taking as the leader that's showing up for your life and for your team and for your family, or in whatever capacity it is, there's always a plan. You're always making a plan, right? So the agility and adaptability is so important. But I love that you're using data as one of the mechanisms to kind of go, well, here you have some kind of evidence to kind of showcase, what am I doing? What am I doing successfully? I always, with my executive coaching clients, I always encourage them to keep a portfolio of evidence, to kind of go, don't just take it for granted that you've done so much this year, because you get to, November, December time, and you kind of go, man, I've been so busy and I don't I'm overwhelmed and I'm burnt out, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm so tired. But if you have the data and you kind of go, okay, cool, well, this is what I've achieved. These are the projects I've done throughout the year and I've accomplished, and then there's an actual tracking mechanism that you have to kind of go, well, there's evidence to prove what you're capable of to start it off with, and secondly, the evidence to prove that you're really capable at what it is you're doing. And so from a fitness perspective, and I mean, you do lifestyle and fitness coaching, those components really play into why the data is so important, right?
Absolutely. And I think that data can also be utilized to help us understand what the next step is, right? So if it's, the goal is to never be busy. The goal is to be happy, right? Anybody can be busy. I can fill my schedule, all kinds of stuff that, when people ask me, Santa, how are you? Busy? That anxiety-filled response that everybody has, where no, the goal is to be happy, man. I want to be experiencing a fulfilled life with purpose that allows me to feel like I'm getting the most out of my vessel while I'm here, right? So I think that as long as we keep that in mind, that, okay, if I know I'm making X amount of money a month and I'm spending X amount of money a month, then I have this disposable income gap where I could spend that on things that might make my life feel more fulfilled, versus having a scarcity mindset of, I just got to hold on to this just in case always, right? So when we recognize a life of abundance and opportunity, that's where we can find more opportunities to have a more fulfilling life, right? And when we use that data to our advantage, it helps us look at things from a lens more so of, okay, here are all the things that I've done, right? And when we make decisions based on that, this is more of the idea of working on our business versus working in our business. It's the same thing with our life as well. Am I working on myself? Am I working in myself, right? Because when I'm working in myself, these are things that are where I'm interacting with people on a daily basis, like more customer facing stuff, to make a reference to more business.
Yeah.
But when I'm working on myself, this is like I'm going to therapy, or I am working on my fitness and my health, things that are going to help me show up more on that other side of it, right? Because if I'm not showing up more on that side, then that means there's a lack of work on myself. And if I'm not working on myself in a way that's always constantly helping me evolve and grow as a person, then I'm stagnant, which is also not a terrible thing, right? Sometimes we're at a place where we need to be, and we just look at that intensity and we cook at that duration for an extended period of time, and then we go up to the next level. But I think that if we're only focused on working, in ourselves or on ourselves exclusively, the inverse tends to suffer a bit. And then that's when we feel areas of stagnation, or maybe like we're not progressing in life to the areas or to the places that we want to be at.
Absolutely. And I love that, because, that concept of working on a business versus in a business is, like, you are your business in any case, and it's about time that we sort of frame it that way and kind of look at, if you were running a business here, what systems are in place for you? How are you tracking how well you're doing at this business of being you, right? And the sentiment of who are you, comes to mind as you were speaking, right? And can you answer that versus just being busy? Because how are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm busy. That's the very first thing people generally say. And you go, okay, so is that you're just being busy the whole time? And you're also putting it out. You're putting it, it's your mouth is closest to your ears when you're putting it out like that into the universe. So you're professing that you're just busy. Busy with what? And how is it serving you? And I like the fact that you point out that being happy is a good starting point. And so many people get so busy with the busyness that they forget that, like, is that even serving the happiness for you as an individual? I don't think often people don't get that. But I mean, if you could leave us with just like some maybe some tips that we can start activating, this being better at our lifestyle and our own fitness and our own mindset. What are some of those tips that we can start with, just taking away from this conversation today?
I think it's, like we'd mentioned earlier, just tracking down what you're currently doing. Write it down. It doesn't have to be in a fancy, document. It can just be on pen and paper. What is my goal, right? If my goal is to improve my health, okay, let's start with what health means to you. If health means to you being able to wake up in the morning and feel energized, then we work backwards from the goal. Okay, if energy is my challenge, then maybe I need to go to sleep earlier. Well, what time am I currently going to bed? Right? So just figuring out what it is we want to achieve and how to work backwards from there in a logical sense that's going to be gradual and not so drastic. So this way it can be sustainable over a long period of time. Because in a world where we're given everything we want almost immediately, that immediate gratification, we have to recognize that our body is a living organism that requires time and effort to experience the change that we're looking to have. So we're going to have to take approaches that are sustainable over a longer period of time. So this way we can see those changes gradually over time and they stay permanent versus, okay, I lost 10 pounds in a short period of time, but then I put on 20 pounds after that, right? So I'm up 10. So I think coming to the approach that you're looking to take with space to make change, because if there's not enough space in my life to make that change, then I'm kind of setting myself up for success here, or for failure here rather. So when I am asking myself, okay, I want to achieve a fitness or health goal, do I have space for that? Because there's going to have to be a degree of identity that you now put behind you, or certain facets of your life that you put behind you to be able to have the space to do that, right? As we make these changes in our body, we ourselves change too. So that means that maybe the circle of friends we're around starts to change, and that's okay. Or maybe the places we go start to change, right? Maybe we don't go to bars and pubs as much anymore. Maybe we go to fitness centers instead, right? So these different parts of our identity start to shift in a more positive way that's going to be conducive to the lifestyle we want to live. And that's how we achieve those goals too. So
I love that. Yeah. So, Santo, like, it's been such an interesting, I mean, I say it's a quick half an hour that we've already gone through, but I mean, what I love about, your approach to this is, it's not just about fitness, although that's what your expertise is. There's a whole bunch that goes into, having a better lifestyle. And I love that we've sort of unpacked that more. If people want to get hold of you, what is the quickest way that we get hold of you, and where do we go?
If you want to get a hold of me, you could message me on Instagram at santo.chiappetta. So santo.chia, double P as in Peter, E-double-T as in Tom, A. You can also reach me at my website at strengthbysanto.com at the apply page if you're looking to get any sort of coaching. And those are my two main points of contact. You can also email me if you'd like to at strengthbysanto@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And you're obviously, you do a lot of online work as well. So, I mean, even though it's a lifestyle fitness approach, you can help people online and do that remotely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have over 50 clients across the world. So I have some people in the United States. I have a couple people in Europe. I have some people in Canada as well. So I work with people internationally to try and help them improve their health. So this way they get the most out of life and make sure that their body represents the success that they've had in their career. So this way it's not, there's no discrepancy between the success that they've experienced career-wise versus health-wise.
Fantastic. I love that. Guys, if you want to check it out, all the information will be in the description boxes below. So Santo Chiappetta, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. Chat to you soon. Cheers for now.
Bye-bye.